This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so even though this Shabbat we're reading Parsha Ta'azinu, we discussed that last week, I should say, because this past Shabbos being Rosh Hashanah, so we did not read the regular reading. This Shabbos will be Ha'azinu. However, we're going to discuss Zos HaBracha. Zot HaBracha, this is the blessing. That is, of course, the very last Parsha of the Torah and the very last words of the Torah that it gives us going forward. So that, of course, we're not going to read for a little while, meaning this Shabbos is Hazinu, and then we have Yom Kippur, and then we have Sukkot on Shabbos and Sunday. So again, special reading for Sukkot. The next Shabbos is Shmini Atzeret, the last day of Sukkot, we'll say, right? And therefore, that also special reading. On that Sunday is Simchat Torah, and that's when we read V'zot HaBracha, and we start Bereshit. Okay? So when you get a little bit of a jump over here, we will be going back a little bit to a few of the other places that we had, and we'll see what we have. Okay, good. James, good to have you along, and Janet also. Good. Okay, so on page 1112, 1102, 1112, that's where in the Art Scroll Stone Edition we have Zot HaBracha. The Zot HaBracha, and this is the blessing Asher Beirach Moshe Ish HaElokim et Bnei Yisroel. That Moshe, the Ish HaElokim, gave to Bnei Yisrael. Ish HaElokim, the man of God, but we know there are different names for God, and Elokim is a name that refers to justice, judgment, and it's not often that a person is called Ish HaElokim. So some explain that these blessings that Moshe was giving was not just his own blessings, but they were godly, coming from God, that they came. Now it's interesting in the context, 1112. Right? Oh, Shalom Aro. Boker Tov, מה שלומך? יש לי פה? איך שאתה רוצה. You balance out the room a little bit. Okay. Now we know Elokim is the name of God that denotes judgment. So the Or HaChaim, I believe, says very interestingly, we all exist by the chesed of God. Meaning we're God. Actually, one of the things that we say in our Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davening is, Al ta'amod b'mishpat imanu, ki lo yutzdak lefanecha kol chai. Al ta'amod b'mishpat imanu. Don't stand with mishpat, with justice, right? Don't judge us with mishpat, with justice. What does Ciner really deserve? Because no living can stand before you if you're going to apply this midah, this attribute of justice, of strict judgment. Moshe was an exception. I mean, even the patriarchs, even the matriarchs would need God's chesed, kindness, in their judgment. Moshe was Ish HaElokim. Moshe could stand there before God as judge with strict justice, and he would still be standing. What's fascinating then is, but what's he doing? He's giving us a beracha. What does beracha mean? So we say it means blessing, right? But let's look, fascinating, the Maharal points out, let's look at the letters of the word bracha. The shorish, the root, is bet, resh, chaf. Bet has a numerical value of 2. Reish has a numerical value of 200. Chaf has a numerical value of 20. So it's all our twos. It's 2 in the single digit, 2 in the 10 digit, 2 in the 100 digit. 2, Bet, Reish, 200, Chaf, 20. And the Maharal says 2 is the greatest possible increase, meaning from 1 to 2 is a 100% increase. From 2 to 3 is a paltry 50%. 3 to 4, etc., 30%, 33%, etc. So the word bracha comes from this idea of an increase. An increase means an overflowing. An overflowing which is almost the antithesis of mishpat, of judgment. Overflow is going beyond. Mishpat is exactly what's deserved. So over here we see an incredible, incredible aspect. Moshe is Ish HaElokim. Moshe is the man of judgment. But where's that? When it comes to himself. When it comes to everyone else, what is he all about? An overflowing of bracha, an overflowing of blessing. It's interesting, those 3 letters, Bet, Resh, Chaf, which is bracha, it also is Berech. Berech means our knee. What would the connection be? Why would there, perhaps, what might a connection be that the word for blessing and the word for a knee would have the same exact letters and the same exact orders? Bet, Resh, Chaf. What might there be?
All I can think of is you bend your knee, you bend
Good,
the knee,
good.
you bend
Okay, so good.
worship
Yes. So bending the knee is like bowing. It's like, the way I see it, it's humbling oneself. Right? So perhaps the way that one can receive blessing is by bending a little bit, by humbling ourselves, right? Right? Whether it is by humbling ourselves before God, certainly, but that way the conduits of blessing open up, right? When it's I deserve, I'm this, I'm that, Hashem says, oh yeah, you got it on your own? Fair enough. Let's see how that's going to look, right? Whereas when we humble ourselves before God, we turn ourselves into a kli, into a vessel that can receive blessing. Good. I think also when we humble ourselves before other people, not groveling, give me, but when we are willing to work with others. And that also opens up the idea of bracha, of blessing, of increase, right? I mentioned one of the drushes over Rosh Hashanah, the idea of Naaseh Adam. Hashem said, let us make man. And we know that created a whole stir with Christianity and still does, right? That the idea that, well, God is more than one, right? And Rashi, different explanations. We focused on Rosh Hashanah. We focused on the idea of Naaseh Adam. The Zohar says, who's we? God and me. When it comes to me, it's God and me. When it comes to Aaron, it's God and Aaron. When it comes to Rose, it's God and Rose, and Esther and Linda and Eliezer. It's each of us partner with God. But Rashi on the Chumash says that Nasa is God discussed it with the angels. Now, clearly the angels have nothing to add to the discussion that God is not aware of. So why was it written in such a way? To teach us to seek counsel even from those who you think or who might actually know less than you. They might know less than you, but nevertheless, every person is their own world. Every person has their own experiences and therefore their own perspectives. And all of a sudden, you could hear things differently. You could see things in a different way that you hadn't seen it. You might be smarter. You might know a lot more, but they're going to see it in a different manner, and you can gain from that. That's also the barech, the knee, right? And we're willing to humble ourselves before others, we'll also open ourselves up for bracha, for a blessing. So it's blessing from God, it's blessing from the world around us. Nice. One thing I now what's interesting is it's not 220, 200 in order. It's not bet chaf resh. It's bet resh chaf. It's 220. That's the lettering. So I would think if it's all about increase, let it be 220, 200. Perhaps why might it be that it goes backwards or gets interrupted, we'll say? Bet is 2, Resh is 200, Chaf is 20. Any ideas out there, either online or in person? I can't see so well over here with my screen. So if anyone talk, yeah, please.
Maybe with the resh in the middle for Ra, when we're evil, when we're acting up, the blessings decrease.
Hmm,
I don't know, maybe a thought? I don't know.
that's an interesting idea. Resh is the first letter of Ra, so therefore that can cause a decrease in the blessing. Nice idea. Nice idea, Kathy. Anybody else? Nice. A thought that I had is that we shouldn't expect the bracha to be ever, ever, ever increasing. That's not life. It could be 2, it could be 200, it could dip down to 220, right? Meaning life, like we say by a heart monitor. If it's going like that, that's not what we want. That means there's death, right? Life is constantly up and down, up and down. Rav Volbe writes about this in his Alei Shur, quoting from Rabbeinu Tam, that in the spiritual life, there's always going to be ups and downs, ups and downs. And inevitably, we have those downs. And a person shouldn't think, oh, I guess this isn't for me, because now I'm no longer as inspired. I'm no longer on fire like I once was. Nah, I guess it's not for me. Understand that is how it's going to work. There's always the ups and downs, ups and downs. That is the normal flow. Very famously, there is a letter that was written to Rav Hutner Zatzal, one of his students, that he was going through a tough time, and therefore he thought maybe it's not for me. And he wrote back to him very, very classically, very famously. He wrote back that the pasuk says in Mishlei, Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'kam. The 7 times that Tzadik falls and he gets up. Right? So we often mistakenly understand that, wow, even though he fell 7 times, he still got up. Now that's a tzaddik, that's a righteous person. Footnote says no. It's the falling and the getting up, and the falling and getting up, and the falling and getting up, and that persevering 7 times. That's what makes the person into a tzaddik. That's what forms that's what lifts the person up. That's what changes the person. When we all have our falls, and then we pick ourselves up. So it's not 220, 200, like the stock market. It never goes like that, right? But you hope it's going to make its way up, but with ups and downs, 220, up. That's how we work our way through. And Moshe now gives this bracha, gives this blessing to all of the tribes. Each of the tribes gets its own unique blessing because each tribe, each person is unique, each tribe is unique, each one has its strengths, and the bracha is taking the strengths that one has and building on that. Right? Actually, back before, we also had Yaakov in the end of Bereshit. We had Yaakov giving a blessing to each of his sons. And then it says, Ish kabir chato beirach otam. Each one according to his blessing, he blessed them. What does that mean according to his blessing? According to who they were, according to their strengths, according to their tendencies. You have to take each person's ability and build on that. We don't cubbyhole. We don't say everyone's got to be exactly the same, but we take each person and their strengths, and it needs to be built upon. Very famously, I want to point out on page 1116, which is Perek Lamed Gimel, Pasuk Yud Chet, 18, chapter 33, verse 18, Pasuk Yud Chet, Lizvulun Amar, to the tribe, to Zvulun, to the tribe of Zvulun, he said, Samach Zvulun Bitzeitecha, Zvulun, you shall rejoice when you go out. The Yisachar, and your brother Yisachar will be in his ohalecha, in your tent. And Rashi there explains very famously, Zvulun and Yisachar made a partnership between themselves. Zvulun, Smach Zvulun B'Tzeitecha, Zvulun was the merchant who would go out on his boats and do all of his business. And what would he do? With that, he would support his brother Yisachar, who were the ones who were ba'ohel. They were in the tent. They were in the tent of Torah. They were the studiers of Torah. So we had this Yisachar Zvulun partnership, as it's known today. Very, 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 very common today, right? If a person is in business, so then very often they'll take on. I know my son, right, who's in business, so he takes on someone in Israel who's learning, and he helps support that person, and that way you have what we call the Yisachar Zvulun partnership. And what's fascinating is, as Rashi points out, Hiktim Zvulun Yisachar. Not only that, it writes Zvulun first. Hiktim, he's written first. Shetorato shel Yisachar al yedei Zvulun haita, because he's the one who enables that Torah learning of Yisachar that only happens because of Zvulun. That's what we say also when we put back the Torah every Shabbos, right? The pasuk Eitz Chayim Hi. It is a tree of life. Lamachazikim ba, for those who uphold it, for those who support. It's not only a tree of life for those who are studying it, it's also a tree of life, lamachazikim ba, to those who uphold it, to those who support it. And famously, the Chavetz Chaim points out, there are lots of different kalim, vessels, that we had in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, in the temple, Beit HaMikdash. We had a shulchan, we had a menorah, we had a mizbeach, we had an aron, right? We had the table, the altar, the menorah, all these different things, the aron, the ark, and many of them had these poles, badim, poles, which were used for transport. Okay? Now, if it's there for transport, once you're no longer transporting it, what would you do with the poles? You take them out. You don't need them anymore. By the aron, by the ark, it says there, the poles are not allowed to be removed. Lo yasuru, they cannot be removed. And the Chavetz Chaim sees a beautiful symbolism in that. That I might think, well, what are the poles there to do? To uphold the aron, to uphold the ark, to uphold the Torah. I might think that when it's no longer needed to uphold, right, so then they take out those poles and get new poles. He said that no, those poles get the Kedusha. They attain the holiness of the aron, of the ark itself. So too those who support Torah, they become part and parcel of that ark, of that Torah. And that's the symbolism he sees, that those poles cannot be removed. They always have to remain in there. They have that, they attain that same Kedusha. And over here we see the idea that Zvulun is mentioned first.
Rabbi,
Okay. Yes.
so this kind of brings up an aside of, although the Leviim were designated as the teachers, if Issachar was that good of a scholarly group, were they allowed to teach and
No,
and tell
no one
Torah to
was
others?
designated as teachers to the exclusion of anyone else.
Okay, so
Lilmod
theoretically,
ululamed, we say. Each of us have an obligation, lilmod, to learn, ululamed, and to teach, right? That's the bracha we say, the blessing we say right before the Shema every day. Lilmod, to learn, ululamed, and to teach. Lishmor, to observe, which is abstaining from the prohibitions, that's prohibited, velasot, and to do. Ulakayem, and to fulfill, et kol divrei talmud Toratecha, all the words of your teaching of the Torah, be ahava, with love.
so
Okay?
was Issachar known for being teachers then?
Yes, yes. They were known also for being Kovea Itim, for their Torah knowledge and astronomy knowledge in terms of the months, in terms of the years, and all that goes into that. Yes, Issachar was definitely known for that. Okay, let's go now for the very end of the Torah, chapter 34, Perek Lamed Daled. Vayal Moshe. Moshe went up, page 1120 in the Stone Chumash, where 34 begins. Moshe ascended Me'arvot Moab, from the plains of Moab, El Har Nevo, to Mount Nevo, Rosh HaPisgah, to the summit there, Asher al Pnei Yericho, that faces Yericho, Vayareu Hashem et kol haaretz, and God showed him all the land. Et ha-Gilad, and the Gilad, Ad-Dan, all of Naphtali, et Eretz Ephraim, the land of Ephraim, and Menashe, the Eretz of Yehuda, Ad Hayam Ha'acharon, until as far as the western sea, right? Rashi brings another idea, not just Yam Acharon, but Yom Acharon. Not the Yam, not the Western Sea, but the Yom Acharon, until the final day, Rashi says. Harei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God showed him, Kol HaMa'oraot, all that which would happen. Sha'atidin, that will happen in the future, le'aret, to occur, Yisroel, ad sheyichayu hametim, all the way until the time of the Techiyat HaMetim, the revival, the resuscitation, right? The time of the post-Mashiach time, right? Everything that would happen. The Et, HaNegev, the Kikar, Bikad Yericho, Ir Tamarim, Vayomer, Pasuk Dalet, Hashem Elav. God said to him, Zot haaretz, this is the land. Asher nishbati, that I swore la'Avram, to give to Abraham, Yitzchak, Isaac, Yaakov, Jacob, Lamor, saying, L'zaracha et nena, to your seed I will give it. Hereticha ve'necha, I've shown it to you, to your eyes. Vishama lo ta'avor, but you will not pass to there. Vayamat sham Moshe Eved Hashem. Moshe, the Eved Hashem, died there be'eretz Moab, in the land of Moab, al pi Hashem, by the mouth of Hashem. That's referred to as nishika. Right? We have an expression, the kiss of death. Right? So al pi Hashem, this is the highest level, the gentlest passing. The Gemara says Gemara in Brachos says there are different types of death. Some of it is like pulling the wool out from where it got entangled in thorns. That's the most difficult. The simplest is removing a hair from milk, removing a strand of hair from milk. It comes out so gently, so easily. Neshika is the most gentle, the most intimate mode of passing. And the way I believe an explanation that I've heard on that is it depends how enmeshed a person has become to this world. If a person is so enmeshed in this world, then death is like pulling the wool out from the thorns. You have to disentangle it. You have to extricate it from all the connections that we have to the physical, to the material. If a person is living a spiritual life, and as we always say, every mitzvah is the opportunity to bring spirituality into ourselves, into the world. If a person is leading a truly spiritual life, then the transition from the earthly to the spiritual, to the heavenly, is very, very smooth, very easily. Vayikbor oto, and he buried him. Bagai, in a depression, in a cleft, in the land of Moab, Mul Beit Peor, across in Beit Peor, Lo Yada Isha Kvurato, Ad Hayom Hazeh. We do not know where Moshe is buried until this day. Right? We are not meant to know where Moshe is buried. Right? Because we probably turn it into a shrine, or we keep going back there, right? We be sending faxes there nowadays, right, to his gravesite, right? That's not what we're supposed to do. And we'll soon see more about that. Who buried Moshe? And he buried him. Rashi says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu bichvodo. God himself in all of his glory and honor buried Moshe. Hashem buried Moshe. Fascinating. If you remember, remember we began, Moshe was carrying the bones of Yosef, right? Moshe did not dish it off to someone else. Hey, you take care of that, right? Moshe himself tended to the burial of Yosef. Hashem or to the bones of Yosef, I should say, right? Hashem tended to that of Moshe. So there's a very, very interesting medrash that says the Torah begins with chesed and ends with chesed. What chesed does it end with? That we see right here. Hashem burying Moshe. That's the chesed that it ends with. What chesed does it begin with? So if you were to say that, if I would tell you the Torah begins with chesed, what chesed might you say the Torah begins with? Life, creation, creating Adam and Eve, putting them into the Garden of Eden. The Medrash says no. Which chesed do we say the Torah began with? Making the garments for Adam and Eve. So why does it pick that? As Rose, you said, there were other chesed that olam chesed yibaneh. The whole world is built on chesed, right? We're created, we're born. What merit did we have before we were born to make us worthy of being born? None. Olam chesed yibaneh. It was an act of kindness that God brought us into this world. So why speak about the giving of the garments along with this? And the idea is we have this bookends. Chesed, right? You want to know what a book's about? Well, what's the first chapter about? What's the last chapter about? Then you could understand the whole book is filled with that. It's all about chesed. Famously, Rabbi Kiva said, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself. That is the klal. That is the klal gadol b'Torah, right? The convert who came to Hillel wanted to learn the entire Torah on one foot. Hillel said, "Marsani lecha lechavecha lo tavid." That which you don't want done to you, don't do to anyone else. Everything else is a perush. Go and learn it. It's all chesed. But why those two chasadim? I heard a very, any ideas? You might have heard it from me before, Esther.
Sorry?
You might have heard it from me, or you might have your own idea.
You know what, I'm just thinking.
Give it a whirl.
They're both very direct acts of God in order to not humiliate, to show,
Okay.
to uphold the
Dignity.
dignity.
Beautiful.
Because,
Beautiful.
I don't know that people, in the sphere that Moshe was in, he may not have told the other people, hey, I'm going to die because I did this chet. Other people may not have known that he didn't say it, and God was maybe merciful.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So these are both clothing someone, burying someone. That is giving them the self-dignity, giving them the self-respect, which is a very beautiful idea. If I could just build on that for a second. So we see that when we do chesed to someone else, it has to be within that framework of their self-dignity, their self-respect, right? Do it in a way that it doesn't make them feel lower, that they're on the receiving end, but do it in a way that it lifts them up. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yes, Aaron?
Extremely important.
Yeah, yeah. So important. Very often we say it's not just what you do, right? It's how you do it, right? To do it in a way that they maintain their dignity, their respect. Beautiful. Any other ideas? So an idea that I've shared before is that these are two unique situations in that in both of them, we created against God's admonition, against God's words, against God's advice. We got ourselves into the mess, and nevertheless, Hashem picked us up and pulled us out of it, right? Because very often, right, we have an attitude, I told him not to do it, and he did it. And exactly what I was afraid would happen happened. Exactly what I told them might happen, that's what happened. I should help them now. Let him get himself out of it. He got himself into it. Let him get himself out of it. All right? I told him. I warned him. I'm not going there to pick up the pieces now. And Hashem told them, don't eat from the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge of Tov and Rav, good and evil. And they ate from it, and now they're in a dire situation. They're embarrassed. They recognize that they are naked now, and they're in need of chesed. So even though Hashem told them not to do it, and they did it, and now they're in a pickle, Hashem is there to pick the person up. Hashem told Moshe, speak to the rock. What did Moshe do? He hit the rock. That's why he's not going into the land of Israel. That's why he's being buried outside the land of Israel. Hashem takes care of that burial. And that really teaches us how it is that we are supposed to do chesed for another person. Because who do we imagine, which figures in our life would do a chesed for us, even when we told them, they told them, don't do it, not a good idea. They go ahead, they do it, and now they need to be picked up. Who's there to pick us up? Parents, our mother, our father. That is who is there to pick us up. Hashem is this loving parent. Avinu, Av Harachaman, our Father, compassionate Father. Right? So when we do chesed, we need to do the chesed as a loving parent would do it. Even though we might not be that person's parent, but we know who is that person's parent, Hashem. And we know when our kids are in trouble, when someone else comes along and helps, we know how appreciative we are to that person. So when Hashem's kids are in trouble, we need to step up and do what we can to help. Yes, Rose.
I was going to say, with mercy and kindness came to my mind. So they were clothed, although they were told not to do what they did, Hashem was still kind and merciful and
Yeah,
did what
yeah, exactly. Beautiful. Even in those situations, that's the chesed that the Torah is painting for us, right? To have that generosity of spirit and understanding. I forget who said. I think Rabbi Yonah says this when talking about the chesed of Abraham, right? It's not just giving the other person what they need, but it's viewing yourself. Were I in that situation, how would I want to be treated? Right? And certainly when we mess up, as we all mess up, we would like someone not to say the classic "I told you so," but to, but to help us get ourselves out of the mire that we might have got ourselves somewhat stuck in. Yes, Esther.
And it just makes me think of, if a person has more than one child and they have one child who's always getting into trouble or has issues, whatever, they tend to spend a lot of time on that child, and that's the one who gets a lot of their attention.
Yeah.
Simply because,
The need.
they need it. They
Yeah.
need that guidance more
Yeah.
than maybe the others.
Yeah. Beautiful. Actually, back in Parshat Mishpatim, right, as we're about to finish another round of our Torah Parsha study, back in Mishpatim, which is all the different laws. So it starts off with the laws of an Eved Ivri, of a Jewish slave, who becomes a slave either because the person stole and was unable to pay back. Therefore, he'll be sold for those 6 years in order to the money that he sold for will reimburse the person from whom he stole, or a person who says, I don't want the pressures of life. This communism almost. I'll work, you take care of all my needs, tell me what to do, I'll do it. I don't want to pay bills, I don't have to worry about all of that. And that is a person, and of course that person is willingly accepting another master besides the master. So that's where the parsha begins, with the most troubled of Hashem's children. That's who he begins with. Okay, so now the last 8 well, let's go a little further. The end of verse 6. No one knows when Moshe is buried until today. It's somewhere in present day Jordan. Now, in Jordan, they have a mountain that they call Nebi Musa. Nebi Musa is Arabic for Nebi, Navi, prophet, Musa, Moshe, right? That's where they think he's buried, but that's just to attract tourists, right? No one knows where he is buried. Moshe ben Me'ah ve'esrim shana b'moto. Moshe was 120 upon his death, right? That's how we get the expression. He should live ad Me'ah ve'esrim, until 120. Lo chata eino v'lo nas lecho, right? His eyes had not dimmed, his vigor had not diminished, right? So that's the real bracha of ad Me'ah ve'esrim, 120 with vitality, with strength. My grandfather, alav shalom, my father's father, passed away at age 95. And he was, that morning, he went to go buy some schnapps and some herring because he had a yard site coming up one of the next mornings. And when a person has a yard site, the anniversary of the passing, so you bring some food to the shul so people can make a bracha, and that serves to help elevate the soul. He had prepared that. He went to Mincha Mariv in shul that night. On his way back, he had some sort of aneurysm and passed away very, 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 very within an hour or two at most after that. That's the blessing, not just until 120, but with vigor and with strength. Vayivku b'nei Yisroel et Moshe, and the children of Israel cried for Moshe ba'arva Moab, in the plains of Moab, shloshim yom, 30 days, vayitmu, and then they completed Yemei, the days, b'chi, of crying, Avel, mourning for Moshe. Yeshua ben Nun malei ruach chachma. Yeshua ben Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom. Kisamach Moshe, Moshe had laid his hands upon him, transferring the leadership to him. By Yishmuel Bnei Yisrael. And the children of Israel, they listened to him. Kashet Siva Hashem, Moshe, as Hashem had commanded Moshe. V'lo kam naviot v'Yisrael k'Moshe. There will never again arise a prophet in Israel like Moshe. Asher yid'o Hashem, that God knew him. Panim el panim. Literally, fine. Literally, panim el panim, face to face. This intimate connection. L'chol ha'otot, for all the signs. V'hamoftim, and the wonders. Asher shalacho Hashem, that God sent him la'asot, to do. The Eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. L'faro, to Pharaoh. Or l'chol avadav, to all of his servants. Or l'chol artzot, to all his land. Or l'chol hayad hachazakah, and that strong hand. Or l'chol amoradol, and the awesome power. Asher asam Moshe, that Moshe did leinei, before the eyes of Kol Yisrael, before the eyes of all of Israel. Okay? For the eyes of all of Israel. Oh, my little Olam Kid fans over there. Okay. A number of things here. The Gemara discusses these last 8 psukim. Pasuk Hey, Vayamat Sham Moshe. Moshe died. The servant of God. Pasuk Hey, verse 5. In the land of Moab, Al Pi Hashem. We have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And even that pasuk, 5 also. Who wrote that pasuk? So one, right? Moshe could not have written and Moshe died. That's not true. If he's writing it, he's alive. Right? So in the next psukim, if he died, verse 5, if he wrote Moshe died, he's got to be dead. So, who wrote the last 8 psukim, the last 8 verses of the Torah? Who wrote that? The Gemara in Makot, the Talmud in Makot asks. And one answer that's given is what Esther said. Yehoshua, Joshua, he wrote these last 8 psukim of the Torah. The other opinion says Moshe wrote it bidema. Dema, one understanding of the word bidema is demaot. Demaot means tears. Moshe wrote it with tears, meaning, perhaps the way that's understood is that similar to, if any of you have ever been at a completion of a Sefer Torah, so at the completion of the Sefer Torah, the last letters are all filled in. Okay? Now, they're not going to trust me. I'm not a sofer. I'm not a scribe. I'm also not overly artistic. They're not going to trust me, this beautiful Sefer Torah, written by a scribe with a beautiful handwriting. Also, they're going to give it to me to do my scroll over there? No. What happens? The sofer will write all the last letters, just the outline of the letter. And then the incompetents like myself will take the quill, right? If they'll trust us, we'll fill it in, or typically we'll hold the arm of the sofer as he fills it in, right? But it's written, the outside is traced, and then it gets filled in. So Moshe wrote it bidmaot. Moshe wrote it with tears, meaning his tears created the outline of all of these letters. So he wasn't writing Moshe died, he's still alive, but his tears, knowing he was leaving this world of opportunity, famous story, the Vilna Gaon, as on his deathbed he's crying. His students say to him, Rebbe, you taught us that if a person is crying as he's leaving this world, it is a siman ra. It is a bad sign, a bad indication. Rebbe, why are you crying? And he held up his tzitzit, and he said, a world where you can buy this garment with tzitzit for a few kopecks, for a few cents. And a person who fulfills that mitzvah, he merits to be roeh pnei hashchina. He merits to see the face of God's countenance. Whatever that means, it's a high level in the world to come. And I'm leaving such a world of opportunity. How could I not be crying? And the Chafetz Chaim gives this famous mashal of a person who can't support himself, goes to a faraway land where he heard that the streets are lined there with diamonds. It's just rocks all around. Somewhere in South Africa, near the mines over there. You have these diamonds all around. And he goes there, right? And the idea is he'll bring back all these diamonds. But once he's there, that's not the currency of that land. So he gets all involved in the currency of that land. When he finally travels back home, he just has a few of those leftover diamonds, those senseless rocks in his pocket. He brought back the currency of that land. What was that? Fish. Fish was the currency. By the time he comes back on the boat, it smells, it stinks, it's rotten. So too Hashem sends us to this world where there are diamonds lining the streets. The diamonds are the mitzvot, the masim tovim, the acts of kindness, the chesed of the bookmarks of this Torah. What happens is we get distracted and we think, oh, the real currency over here is fish. We have to become rich. We need money. We need stuff. We need things. We need possessions. That's what we need. And then, time to go back home. We have to make sure we bring back the diamonds. So Moshe was crying, leaving this world of opportunity, and his tears formed the outline of these last letters, these last 8 verses, and then it was filled in afterwards. So the entire Torah was written by Moshe, but the last 8 psukim, the last 8 verses, were written by the outline of his tears. That's what formed the last 8 psukim. Another way of understanding it is as follows, and this is very, very fascinating. We know our Torah as it's read, as our Torah is written. There's no nekudot, there's no vowels, there's no sof pasuk, there's no letting us know where a verse begins, the next one, where a verse ends, and the next one begins, and all the trup, the cantillation, the way it is sung, all of that is not in the Torah. Why is that not in the Torah? Well, that limits the Torah to a certain single understanding. But the Torah, there's shivim panim, 70 facets to the Torah. There are all these levels of understanding. Famously, the Gemara says that by the sin of the golden calf, when Aaron saw everyone dancing around, vayiven sham mizbeach, he built there an altar. But this very same, and which Aaron did, hoping to delay until Moshe would come down. He said, Chag LaHashem machar, we'll have a holiday for Hashem tomorrow. But without the vowels, that can be vowelized with a completely different meaning, which explains why Aaron built the Mizbeach. It will explain why he built the Mizbeach. Vayaven Aaron mi zevach. Aaron not built, but Aaron understood. Mi zevach, from the one who had been slaughtered. Chor, the son of Miriam, tried to stop the crowd and he was killed. Aaron understood, not that he was afraid to die, al kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name, but he was afraid of the curse, of the accusation that would be against the children of Israel if they killed a Kohen and a Navi on that one day. And therefore, Vayaven, he understood, mi zevach, from the one who had been slaughtered, that he had to try to work with them to delay them, as opposed to standing up against them. And we know on Tisha B'Av, on Yom Kippur, on Tisha B'Av, we mentioned the idea of the Navi Zechariah who was killed. and the blood kept bubbling, the accusation. So that's what he was trying to avoid. So therefore, the Torah is not written with a nikudot in order that it opens itself up to many, many, many other levels. Ramban says the original Torah, the heavenly primordial Torah, not only doesn't have nikudot, didn't have the vowelizations, and the end of the psukim, it also didn't have a space where one word ends and the next one begins. It was a string of letters, just letters, a string of letters. And that's why, because the Torah can be broken up in many different ways. And that's why there's a single letter of the Torah that's missing. It's pasul, it's disqualified until it gets fixed. Why? Because the Torah is nothing but names of God. Now we would understand you're missing a letter in God's name, you got to fix it. Well, the entire Torah is nothing but God's names. How is that? It all depends how you break it down. And that also explains the famous Gemara in Shabbos that the angels were arguing with Moshe, with Hashem. Why are you giving the Torah down there? Your glory should remain in the heavens. And Moshe says to them, oh yeah? Well, let's see what it says in there, right? Slave to Egypt. Were you slaves to Paro? Right? Honor parents. Do you parents don't cheat in business? Do you have competition? Right? It's clearly meant for us. So what were the angels thinking? The angels were thinking, of course, the way it'll be broken down is a very, very base way that applies to mankind. But let it be broken down in a way that it applies to the heavens, to the spiritual realms, the spiritual heights. But the argument was that no, granted it could be broken down either way, but the Torah, angels can't be transformed. Angels are who they are. Human beings can be transformed. Therefore, the Torah needs to be given to us in order to transform us. But the Torah was a string of letters. There are those that explain the Gemara's second answer, that the Torah, the last 8 psukim, were written b'dema. Moshe wrote it b'dema, not with tears, but in a mixed manner, right? A mixed manner, meaning he wrote this string of letters, which has many different ways that it could be broken down. Granted, it would be broken down as Vayamat Sham Moshe. Moshe died there. But he wasn't writing falsehood, because he didn't break it down into Vayamat Sham Moshe. And Moshe died there. He just had Vav, Yud, Mem, Tav, Shin, Mem, Shin, Hey, Ayin, Beth, etc., etc., etc. And that's not a falsehood, because that has many meanings, and that could be broken down in many different ways. So Moshe wrote every last letter of the Torah fully with ink, but the last 8 were not broken down into the words which describe the death of Moshe. Let's look at the last pasuk. L'chol hayad hachazakah, the strong arm. That is, Rashi says, shekibel et haTorah, the luchot biyadav. He received the Torah, the luchot, with his hands. That's the yad hachazakah, the strong hand that went up to the heavens and received the luchot. U'l'chol hamorah gadol, and all the incredible shows of strength that he showed us, right? Miracles that took place in the midbar, in the desert as we were traveling. Asher asam Moshe, that Moshe did, le'enei kol Yisroel, before the eyes of all of Israel. On a simple level, right? We ourselves saw it, right? It's not the hearsay. It's not, oh, we heard that he, whatever. You ourselves saw it. Rashi says, it says by the luchot that he broke the luchot le'eneihem. He broke the tablets. The last show of the strength of Moshe was that he broke the luchot, and God agreed with Moshe that that was the right thing to do. That is the greatest testimony to Moshe, that he broke the luchos. Why, my friends, would that be the greatest testimony to Moshe? Why would breaking the luchos be the greatest testimony to Moshe? That, according to Rashi, is the final words of, when we're talking about the strength of Moshe, that's the final words of the Torah. Why would that be the close?
Maybe getting the words was the highest point of his life. His whole life led to it. He was very invested in it. And to take something that was so personally important to him to accomplish and break them, I would think would take great, great strength and sacrifice.
Okay, beautiful. And why did he break it? Because we were not worthy of receiving it. It would have brought accusation upon us at that point with the Egel. So that's beautiful you're saying, Aaron. If I could just add on. So being that this was what Moshe was all about, but he was willing to break it for the sake, for the benefit of the children of Israel, which is really Moshe's MO throughout. Always, 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 always willing to bend for the people, advocating for them. This sin, Hashem, have mercy. Always, always, always giving himself completely over to Bnei Yisrael, which again is idea of the Torah beginning with Chesed and ending with Chesed. We have Hashem's Chesed burying Moshe. We have Moshe's Chesed of focusing not on what means the most to me, but what is the most important thing right now for the other. And Bnei Yisrael, we needed to see those luchos broken in order to break us out of that path we had taken with the Egel and to redirect us. Wow. Nice. Oh, I love it. Chazak, chazak, we say when we finish a Sefer the Torah. Here's the entire Torah. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, v'nit chazek, and may we be strengthened. Okay, good. We will resume after Sukkot with Bereshit. Bereshit and Noach, my friends. Okay. Yasher koach. Yasher koach. Those over here can't see so well, too bright in here, but pleasure seeing everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. Be well, everybody. And a Gemar Chatima Tova. Thursday, we're going through the Yom Kippur davening. All are welcome to join us at our lunch and learn.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone. L'shana tova.
L'shana Tova, Gemar Chatima Tova.